David knew that simply confronting Karen wouldn't be enough. She thrived on arguments, twisting words until others looked unreasonable. Instead, he decided to let Karen expose herself in front of the very community she tried to control. He began by gathering quiet support from other parents. Whispered conversations at the mailbox and casual chats during evening walks built momentum. One by one, neighbors shared their frustrations. The canceled pool parties, the crying children, the wasted HOA fees. When David revealed the photos of Karen's nieces at the pool, the outrage only grew. The plan was simple. At the next HOA meeting, Karen would face her own rule. David made sure word spread quickly, ensuring the largest turnout the community had seen in years. Parents who rarely attended promised to be there, and even some board members began to reconsider their support for her. Meanwhile, Karen remained oblivious. She bragged about how quiet the pool had become, never suspecting that her secret was about to become public knowledge. Her confidence grew, even as her downfall was being carefully staged. The meeting date drew near, and tension filled the neighborhood. Everyone waited to see if David's evidence would finally put an end to Karen's reign. The HOA meeting began in the cramped community hall, packed tighter than anyone could remember. Parents lined the walls, murmuring about the pool rule that had ruined their summer. Karen sat proudly at the front table, clipboard in hand, prepared to defend her decision. As expected, she started by boasting. She claimed the pool was safer, quieter, and more civilized thanks to her rule. A few board members nodded, but the restless crowd made it clear they weren't convinced. That's when David stood. Calm and collected, he presented his case, not with angry words, but with undeniable proof. He placed photos on the projector for everyone to see. Karen's nieces swimming in the pool during restricted hours, laughing and splashing while other families were locked out. Gasps filled the room. Parents leaned forward, shaking their heads in disbelief. The very rule that had punished their children was one Karen had openly broken for her own convenience. Karen's face flushed, her confident smile vanishing as whispers turned into loud accusations. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. They had supported Karen's decision, but now the hypocrisy was undeniable. The power she had wielded so freely was crumbling before her eyes. The crowd demanded answers. Karen had no script for this moment. The room erupted in frustration as Karen scrambled to defend herself. She muttered excuses about special circumstances and family emergencies, but no one was listening anymore. The trust she had once demanded was shattered in a single night. Parents spoke out one after another, recalling the misery caused by her rule. Children who cried at the fence, families who wasted money on distant pools, the silence of a neighborhood stripped of summer joy. Now, faced with her hypocrisy, the community demanded justice. The board members, cornered by the overwhelming reaction, had no choice. They called an immediate vote, and in front of the entire neighborhood, the pool restriction was overturned. Cheers erupted as the rule was dissolved, restoring access to the families who had been unfairly punished. But the story didn't end there. A motion was raised to remove Karen from the HOA board entirely. The vote was swift, and the result undeniable. Karen was ousted from the position she had clung to for years. That night, the pool was filled again with laughter and splashes, brighter than ever before. The summer had been saved, and Karen's reign of control was over. David's plan had worked, the pool rule. Karen had finally been defeated. What happens when one over-the-top HOA board member tries to ban all kids from the community pool while letting her own nieces swim freely? You won't believe how one clever parent exposed her hypocrisy, sparked a neighborhood uprising, and brought the summer back to the kids. Stay tuned, because Karen's rule was about to backfire in the most satisfying way. The first heat wave of summer had arrived, and the neighborhood pool quickly became the heart of the community. Children splashed, parents relaxed under umbrellas, and laughter carried across the water. For many families, this was the highlight of their year, the one place where everyone could gather, unwind, and escape the relentless heat. But not everyone saw it that way. On the HOA board sat a woman known only as Karen. She had been on the board for years, and her reputation was well established, controlling, quick to complain, and determined to enforce rules that nobody had voted for. When she walked past the pool, her disapproving glare made even the happiest children fall silent. To her, the pool wasn't a place of joy, it was a battlefield. She whispered to other board members that kids were too loud, that the water was too messy, and that the neighborhood deserved a more peaceful environment. Few took her seriously until she proposed something drastic. Karen announced she was drafting a new rule. Children would no longer be allowed in the pool during prime hours. Parents gasped, children cried, but Karen smiled with quiet satisfaction. The seeds of conflict had been planted, and as the board meeting closed, one parent began to form a plan that would change everything. Within a week, Karen pushed her proposal through the HOA board. Using her influence and a few carefully chosen words about safety and property value, she convinced just enough members to vote in favor. The new rule was announced on bright laminated signs taped to the pool gates. Children under 16 restricted from pool use between 12 p.m. 6 p.m. The reaction was immediate. Families were furious. Parents who had paid steep HOA fees felt betrayed, while kids who once spent long afternoons swimming were now forced to watch from behind the fence. Summer had barely begun, but the pool was already emptying, replaced by silence and resentment. Karen, however, thrived on the discontent. She walked proudly past the quiet pool, telling anyone who would listen that order had finally been restored. She even bragged at the next HOA gathering about how peaceful her afternoons had become. But behind the scenes, one parent, David, was quietly observing. He had seen Karen bend the rules before. He knew her arrogance often blinded her to her own mistakes. And if there was one thing David understood, it was that power-hungry people often created the tools of their own downfall. The question wasn't whether Karen would slip up, it was how to catch her when she did. It didn't take long for David's patience to pay off. One hot afternoon, he drove past the pool and noticed something unusual. Through the fence, he saw Karen herself lounging comfortably in a chair, sipping a drink. But she wasn't alone. Sitting beside her were two teenagers, splashing and laughing loudly in the very pool she had restricted for others. At first, David thought he might be mistaken, but as he watched, it became clear. These weren't strangers. They were Karen's nieces visiting for the summer. The same age group she had banned now enjoyed full access, shielded by her authority. The hypocrisy was undeniable. Karen had used her power to exclude everyone else's children while bending the rules for her own family. Parents had been forced to change schedules, cancel swim lessons, and spend extra money on city pools, while Karen enjoyed a private retreat. David quietly took photos, careful not to be seen. He knew evidence would be crucial. Karen was clever, and her word carried weight on the board. But hard proof, especially the kind that spread quickly, would be impossible for her to deny. As he scrolled through the pictures, David realized the perfect moment for his plan was drawing closer.